People who were in that studio still say they felt it before they understood it. That strange ripple that moved through the audience. The moment Maria Alvarez stepped forward. They didn't know why they were leaning in, why the air suddenly felt charged, or why Steve Harvey paused mid-breath as if an invisible hand had pressed on his chest. But they would soon find out, because on that afternoon, tucked inside a brightly lit studio in Atlanta, a quiet woman with a calm smile was about to break the most unbreakable pattern in game show history, and nobody, not even her, realized how big it was going to be. It happened on a Wednesday, the 2nd of August, 2023. A day that should have been ordinary, forgettable, unremarkable, the kind of day people never bother writing down. The Alvarez family from Phoenix had flown in with matching outfits and nervous laughter, the kind of excitement people get when they're inches from something they've only ever seen on television. Their opponents, the Walker family from Tennessee, brought the opposite energy, loud, theatrical, already rehearsing victory dances. At home, it might have looked like just another Family Feud episode. But inside the studio, the audience would later say they felt something brewing, something they couldn't name but couldn't shake either. Maria Alvarez was the quietest person on that stage. A 33-year-old high school math teacher, mother of 2, and the type of woman who apologizes when someone else bumps into her. She stood behind her podium, like she didn't want to take up too much space. While her family clapped, cheered, and celebrated every answer, she simply smiled, offering small nods of encouragement. Not shy, just centered, grounded, observing. Always observing. That was the part nobody understood yet. Her students back home could have told everyone that Miss Alvarez saw the world differently. She didn't just solve problems. She dissected patterns, spotted connections, noticed the invisible threads between things most people never slowed down long enough to see. She joked sometimes that math wasn't numbers, it was Domba. You could prove. And when her family was chosen for Family Feud, that analytical side of her lit up like a Christmas tree. While most contestants prepare by cheering themselves in the mirror or practicing buzzer speed, Maria naturally did research. She watched hundreds of episodes, scribbling down tally marks and noting trends like she was preparing for the Olympics of logic. Her husband teased her. Her sister rolled her eyes. Her students begged her to teach them Feud calculus. But Maria wasn't doing it to win. It was simply how her brain worked. And that brain was about to make television history. The Alvarez family had won 2 rounds already, and the Walkers had snagged one. The energy was high. Steve Harvey was in rare form, pacing, laughing, tossing his cards whenever someone said something ridiculous. And then he called Maria forward for a face-off. She looked small next to Patricia Walker, who bounced on her toes like she had electricity running through her. Cameras zoomed in. The crowd quieted. Steve held up his card. "Ladies," he said, "we surveyed 100 people, top 6 answers on the board. Name something people do when they're nervous." Practically a fossil of game show history. Everybody knew the obvious answers. Bite nails, sweat, fidget, pace, mumble, laugh. Awkwardly, even Steve had heard variations of it hundreds of times. He practically knew the answers before the board did. Patricia hit the buzzer first. "Bite their nails," she shouted. The board dinged. Number 2 answer, clean and predictable. Then Maria placed her hand on the buzzer, lifted her eyes to Steve, and did something the studio swear felt like time slowing down. She said, "Take a standardized test." A silence fell so thick it startled even Maria. People blinked. A man in the back row literally whispered, "Huh?" Steve stared at her like she'd just declared squirrels were running the IRS. He squinted, his mouth slowly dropping open. "I'm sorry," he said. "You say?" "Yes," she repeated, calm as a monk. "Taking a standardized test." Steve blinked. "Ma'am, I think we're in 2 different realities right now." The audience laughed. But Maria didn't flinch. She explained, politely, gently, as if she were helping a student after class. "The question is what people do when they're nervous. People take standardized tests while they're nervous. Millions of them. Every year. It's an activity done during nervousness. Not because of nervousness, but while experiencing it." Something about her tone, logical, confident, unbothered, made everyone go still. Steve looked at his card, then at the camera crew, then at Maria again. "So what you're saying is, you approached the question sideways." "No," she corrected softly. "I approached it literally." And that was when the room shifted. A judge stepped onto the set, then another, and then something no one in the 45-year history of Family Feud had ever seen. The show's head researcher walked onto the stage mid-tappying. Production froze. Cameras stopped rolling. Steve raised his eyebrows so high they practically escaped his face. "What is happening right now?" he asked. "Steve," the researcher said, "we need to pause." This answer requires verification. They called it verification, but it looked more like panic wrapped in professionalism. They weren't just checking if the answer was on the survey. They were checking whether the question itself had been interpreted wrong for nearly half a century. For 35 minutes, the studio buzzed with whispers. Families murmured, audience members tweeted. Steve wandered around in circles saying things like, "This lady done broke the show," and "We gon' have to rewrite the rules, ain't we?" Meanwhile, Maria just waited, hands folded, breathing even, like she knew what was coming. Finally, the researcher returned, holding a tablet like it contained a presidential announcement. "We ran a real-time follow-up survey," she said. "We asked 100 new participants what activities they do while feeling nervous." The entire room leaned forward. 73 of them mentioned taking a test. A beat. That would have been the number one answer. The eruption of sound that followed could have launched the ceiling into orbit. Steve doubled over, laughing in disbelief. Maria's family screamed so loud the microphones clipped. A man in the front row jumped to his feet like his sports team had won the championship. And Steve Harvey, still shaking with shock, walked back to Maria and put a hand on her shoulder. "You," he said, "just changed Family Feud." He wasn't exaggerating. They awarded the Alvarez family the maximum prize on the spot. Not because of points, but because Maria had shifted the entire foundation of the game. She had proven that there wasn't just one way to interpret a question. That sometimes the uncommon answer isn't wrong, it's simply smarter. The Family Feud research department created a brand new protocol the very next day. They named it the Alvarez Protocol, a guideline requiring alternative framework answers to be evaluated instead of dismissed. A whole new category was added to the show's internal database. Maria's answer was the first entry. By the time the episode aired, the moment had exploded across social media. Universities requested full transcripts. Psychologists wrote essays about cognitive reframing. Math teachers played the clip in classrooms. Colleges invited Maria to speak. And in Phoenix, her students walked into class the next morning, grinning like their teacher had just become a superhero. Miss Alvarez became proof that intelligence wasn't about being loud, fast, or flashy. It was about the courage to see something differently. It was about the quiet strength of someone who trusted her logic, even when everyone else thought she was wrong. Her story started showing up in psychology textbooks, in teaching seminars, in research conferences. A paper co-authored by Maria was published on alternative interpretations in survey-based data collection, cited hundreds of times. Her students, inspired, began looking at math problems from new angles. Test scores rose. Curiosity rose even higher, and Maria, she went back to teaching, back to grading papers at her dining table, back to telling her kids to put their shoes on because the bus was coming. But something about her was different. She carried herself like someone who had been reminded, loudly and on national television, that thinking differently is not a flaw. It's a gift, one worth defending. When asked months later how she felt about the whole thing, she said, "I didn't try to break a record. I just answered the question the way it made sense to me." And maybe that was the real magic. The simplest thought, spoken bravely, had rewritten the rules of a 45-year institution. Her moment remains unmatched. The only answer in Family Feud history that stopped production, rewrote the rulebook, and forced a real-time survey to confirm that sometimes the quietest person in the room is thinking the farthest outside the box. If this story lit something inside you, if it reminded you that the world needs your perspective, your voice, your version of thinking, then don't let it end here. Share this with someone who feels overlooked. Tap that like button so this message reaches more people who need it, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that prove the world changes when ordinary people dare to think in extraordinary ways. Now tell me, have you ever seen a problem completely differently than everyone around you? I'd love to hear your story.